I never imagined I'd be the one sitting alone in a quiet hospital break room, staring at a fractured family photo on my phone, and wondering when I became invisible in my own home. My name is Esther Barrett. I'm 28, and for the past 5 years, I've been a registered nurse in critical care, working long, grueling shifts, saving lives while managing the unending chaos of my family's demands in the spaces between. No one outside that break room knows the weight I carry, the silent work I do to keep my family from falling apart. I'm the one who pays the bills, runs errands, picks up prescriptions, arranges repairs, tasks so mundane they erase any recognition of how essential I am. Just last month, I quietly wired $3,200 to cover the mortgage without a word to anyone. No thank you, no acknowledgement, not even a glance. Yet, in the Barrett family's eyes, I'm just the quiet one who fades into the background. My sister, Isabella Clark, 3 years older and infinitely louder, commands attention wherever she goes. She thrives on control and the spotlight, spinning the family narrative so that I'm either the overbearing caretaker or the forgotten shadow. Our father, Robert Barrett, watches these battles unfold with his usual passive silence. His avoidance leaves me caught between loyalty and invisibility, like a ghost in the family's story. Sometimes I wonder if he even sees me at all. The house, deceptively warm and familiar, feels more like a cage where I'm trapped beneath Isabella's sharp words and our father's quiet retreat. Despite all this, I hold on to a flicker of quiet strength, something no one suspects. Our family home is legally in my name. It's a detail I've kept close, a secret power I've never wielded, because I still want to believe in loyalty and love. I've buried my frustrations beneath a layer of patience, telling myself that with time, the fractures can heal. But deep down, a subtle unease coils in my gut, a whisper that not everything in this family is as solid as it seems. The weight of being unseen is exhausting, but I remind myself to stay patient, to keep faith that family means more than dominance or silence. Still, every day I wear the mask of calm, even as my heart aches for recognition. I remember the way Isabella always seemed to draw the family's gaze away from me, how her laughter could fill a room while my contributions were met with polite nods or outright dismissal. Each day felt like a quiet battle I fought alone, my worth measured not by who I was, but by what I did in the shadows. And yet, I never stopped doing it, because despite the pain, I loved them. I just hoped somehow they'd see it someday. The origins of this invisibility trace back to a 7th grade birthday party, a day that still stings in my memory with a sharp clarity. Isabella's party was a grand affair, balloons in every color, a mountain of lavish gifts, and a room full of admiring relatives. Meanwhile, my own modest celebration that same week was barely a footnote. I remember clutching a small, carefully wrapped present, feeling its weight heavier than it should have been. Isabella received glowing praise for being the bright one, the ambitious daughter destined for greatness, while my achievements felt like whispers lost beneath the noise. Our father, Robert, was the hardest to read. His pride in Isabella was unmistakable, a quiet but persistent force that shaped every family interaction. He would often praise her ambition openly, her grades, her leadership roles, while my own hard work felt like it was measured against an impossible standard I never quite met. One memory cuts deeper. My high school graduation. The day was supposed to be a milestone, a celebration of my scholarship and the hours I poured into schoolwork. Instead, Isabella stood in front of family and friends and shrugged it off, saying, "It's not that impressive. There are so many better." The sting of those words echoed long after the ceremony ended. I felt small, diminished before the very people I wanted to impress. But I told myself it was just Isabella's way. Tough love, maybe. I hoped that growing older would soften her edges, that our father's silence was not apathy, but a quiet attempt to keep peace. Yet, year after year, the pattern repeated. The favoritism wasn't just Isabella's doing. It was a family dynamic embedded deep, reinforced by my father's unwillingness to intervene. I internalized the lesson. I had to work harder, be better, invisible, but indispensable, if I wanted even a sliver of recognition. These memories aren't just painful relics. They're the blueprint of a lifelong imbalance. The subtle messages, the quiet neglect, they shaped how I see myself and my place in this family. It's why I push myself so hard, why I carry this invisible load with relentless determination. I tell myself I'm doing it all for love, for family, but sometimes I wonder if love is enough when you're always the one left unseen. Over the last 5 years, the sacrifices I've made for this family have been concrete, tangible, and exhausting. I've contributed over $120,000 toward the mortgage and utilities, money that should have been shared more fairly, but I covered Isabella's portion countless times out of compassion, hoping she'd find her footing. I gave up 2 vacations that my husband Daniel and I had carefully planned, canceling trips we desperately needed so the family bills could be paid without conflict. The hardest sacrifice, though, was turning down a promotion that required relocating. It was a thrilling opportunity in critical care, the kind that could have taken my career to the next level. But I chose to stay, prioritizing family stability over personal ambition. I wanted to believe that by staying, I was holding us all together, but instead, I often felt like I was the only one holding the strings. The responses I got in return cut deeper than I expected. Isabella mocked me openly, calling my responsibility overbearing, accusing me of being desperate for approval, as if my efforts were some kind of weakness. Even Lisa, our younger sister who mostly sides with Isabella, seemed to dismiss my contributions, reinforcing the isolation I felt. Daniel, ever supportive but frustrated, warned me recently, "Esther, you're giving too much. They don't seem to appreciate it." His words echoed my own doubts, but I clung to the hope that my family would eventually acknowledge everything I'd done. That hope has kept me going, even when it felt like I was the only one fighting for this family. In the center of this storm is the family home, valued at $450,000, but officially under my name alone. It's a fact I've kept silent, fearing it would unleash chaos if revealed. I see it as a quiet safeguard, a secret power I've yet to use because love and loyalty still hold me back. This house is more than just bricks and mortar. It's the symbol of all I've sacrificed, and all I still hope to protect. But the imbalance in how my love and effort are received, it's a wound that keeps opening. As I juggle the roles of nurse, provider, and peacemaker, I wonder how much more I can give before there's nothing left of me to give. The tension reached a boiling point one evening at our father's birthday dinner. The room was crowded with family, laughter echoing off the walls, the scent of roasted chicken and fresh bread filling the air. I was trying to enjoy the moment, to pretend the underlying currents didn't exist. But then Isabella turned to me, her voice sharp and loud enough for everyone to hear. "Maybe if you weren't so busy playing housekeeper and banker, you'd have a life." The words cut through the warmth like a knife. The room fell into an awkward silence. Some relatives chuckled nervously, others averted their eyes. I felt my hands tremble, an almost physical sting of shame and invisibility washing over me. The humiliation wasn't just from the insult, but from the way it highlighted exactly how little I mattered in that moment. Daniel caught my eye across the table, offering a small, steadying glance of support, but I swallowed the lump forming in my throat and forced myself to remain composed. I whispered to myself, "She's just stressed. It's not personal." It was the only way I could hold back the tears threatening to spill. This was the first time Isabella's cruelty had been so public and blatant, and it planted a seed of doubt in my heart about the family's future. In a small act of defiance, I stood abruptly, ignoring the dessert Isabella offered me with a mocking smile. "I'm going to get some fresh air," I said quietly, my voice steady, but my heart pounding. Refusing her was a small, significant break from the usual script. As I stepped outside, the cool night air was a sharp contrast to the stifling atmosphere inside. I breathed deeply, letting the silence fill the space Isabella's words had emptied. Part of me wanted to believe it was a momentary lapse, that things could still be fixed with time and patience. But another part, a quieter, more cautious part, wondered if this was the beginning of something far more fractured. I held on to my dignity even as the cracks in my family's foundation grew harder to ignore. The moment I dared to push back, Isabella's claws only dug in deeper. It wasn't long before the subtle whispers began, quiet murmurs that carried more venom than words spoken aloud. I heard it first from Lisa, her voice coated with a pitying tone I couldn't shake. "Esther, maybe you're just too sensitive. You always make mountains out of molehills." It stung because Lisa wasn't just a bystander. She was supposed to be my sister too. But Isabella had spun these threads of doubt so skillfully that even Lisa sounded like a messenger from some other camp. Our father, Robert, didn't speak much about it, but his silence felt heavier than any argument. At family gatherings, the atmosphere thickened around me like a fog. Aunts and cousins who once smiled when I walked in now exchanged glances, their eyes darting away when mine met theirs. "Esther, sweetheart, why stir up drama? Just let it go for once," an older cousin whispered with a faux concern that felt like a slap. I wanted to shout back, to break through the suffocating silence, but all I could do was clutch my coffee cup tighter, its warmth a poor shield against the cold wave washing over me. Then there was Isabella's phone call late one night, her voice syrupy, sweet, but laced with poison that seeped through my skin. "You've always been the one overreacting, Esther. Remember when you cried over Dad's old car? People notice when you make a fuss over nothing." Her words echoed in my mind long after the line went dead. Was I really the problem? Was I just a fragile, oversensitive shadow in this family? Those questions gnawed at me relentlessly. The gaslighting was relentless, and I felt myself spiraling, caught between the urge to defend my truth and the crushing isolation of everyone doubting me. Daniel noticed the change, the way my shoulders started to slump a little more with each passing day. One evening, when I sat silently staring out the window, he said softly, "Don't let them make you doubt yourself. You're not crazy, Esther." His words were a barely audible lifeline in a sea of confusion, but when even the people I loved couldn't shield me from the family's cold dismissal, I felt the walls closing in tighter than ever. Isabella wasn't just fighting me. She was rallying the whole family against me, and I stood alone, trapped between the urge to stand my ground and the fear of being cast out for good. Determined to salvage whatever was left, I arranged a sit-down with Isabella and Dad, hoping that a face-to-face conversation might mend the fraying bonds. We gathered in the living room, the air thick with tension, the silence screaming louder than any argument. I spoke calmly, trying to keep my voice steady as I laid out the facts. How I had quietly carried the financial burden, how Isabella's harsh words cut deeper than anyone could see. "I'm not trying to fight," I said softly. "I just want us to understand each other." But Isabella's response wasn't what I expected. She burst into tears, her voice trembling with practiced vulnerability. "You're twisting everything," she accused, her gaze flickering between me and Dad. "I'm the one who's been patient all these years. You don't see how hard it's been for me." I wanted to believe her pain was real, but the sting of manipulation burned in my chest. Robert avoided my eyes, offering only silent agreement by his quiet presence. The mediator, a family friend I thought would be neutral, downplayed my concerns, calling them overblown and misunderstandings. I left that meeting feeling smaller than ever, unheard, and more isolated than before. The hope I clung to dissolved like smoke. The family wasn't ready to listen, and my attempts at peace only seemed to deepen the divide. That night, as I lay awake, the house felt colder, the familiar walls more like a cage. The truth was clear. This wasn't a misunderstanding, and talking alone wouldn't fix a dynamic so steeped in control and denial. I had tried, and I had failed. But even in that despair, a flicker of something sharper grew, an awareness that I couldn't keep bending to a family that refused to see me. The community fundraiser was supposed to be a simple evening, a chance to support a local cause, surrounded by colleagues and friends who respected me. Instead, it became a public spectacle of humiliation, orchestrated in the cruelest detail. Isabella cornered me near the refreshments, her voice loud enough to carry across the room. "Esther's been buying everyone's affection with money," she sneered. "It's no wonder she's so desperate to prove she's important." The words hit me like a punch to the gut, stripping away the fragile dignity I'd managed to hold on to. Faces I'd worked alongside for years twisted in surprise and confusion. The whispers started immediately, questions about my financial struggles and my always generous, but unseen, support for my family. I felt their eyes pierce me, not with sympathy, but with suspicion. Daniel was nearby, his jaw clenched, anger flashing in his eyes as he realized Isabella's cruelty went beyond family squabbles. It was a calculated attack meant to unravel everything I'd built. The sting of betrayal cut deepest in that room, where professionalism and friendship should have shielded me. The silence that followed Isabella's outburst was deafening. No one spoke up. No one offered comfort. Her smug smile was a brutal contrast to the shock and hurt flooding through me. It wasn't just about pride anymore. This was about my career, my reputation, my very identity being dismantled piece by piece in front of an audience I never imagined would see me as anything but capable and kind. The weight of the moment settled on my shoulders like a lead cloak, reminding me that Isabella's battle wasn't just personal, it was public, and the consequences were real. In the quiet aftermath, I wrestled with a wrenching realization. Isabella's attacks were intentional, precise, and designed to break me entirely. There was no accidental cruelty in her actions, only cold calculation. The fundraiser wasn't just an event, it was a battleground where my private pain became public spectacle. I glanced at Daniel again, feeling his silent support, but knowing this was a fight I had to face alone. The betrayal cut deeper than I could have ever anticipated, and the fractures in my family's foundation were now visible to everyone, and impossible to ignore. Despite the growing pain and isolation, I still held on to one last thread of hope. I sought out Isabella privately, determined to offer forgiveness if it meant salvaging whatever remained of our fractured family. Sitting across from her in the dim light of the kitchen, I spoke clearly, my voice steady but vulnerable. "I just want us to be a family again. I'm willing to put the past behind us if you are," I said, laying my heart bare. I spelled out my needs plainly: respect, honesty, the simple acknowledgement of my feelings. It was a fragile olive branch, but it was sincere. Isabella's response was colder than I expected. Her eyes narrowed, her posture stiffening as if my words were an affront rather than a gesture of peace. "You don't get to dictate terms when you've been the problem all along," she said, voice laced with disdain. The rejection slammed into me like a door shut in my face, harsher than any argument. My vulnerability, my openness, met with nothing but dismissal. The sting of those words carved out a new space in my heart, a place where hope had once lived, but now lay in ruins. In that moment, I understood something profound. I had done everything I could, every sacrifice, every attempt to bridge the gap. The last glimmer of healing was gone, and the emotional door I'd hoped would open instead closed with a final, irrevocable click. I felt the weight of that closure settle deep inside me, a mixture of sorrow and a quiet, resolute strength. There was no bitterness, only necessity. I had to protect myself now, not with anger, but with clear-eyed determination. Because love wasn't enough anymore, and sometimes survival meant standing alone. After that crushing rejection, everything felt like it was unraveling at once. Isabella didn't just stop at dismissing me. She turned my vulnerability into ammunition, twisting my kindness into a weapon against me. The rumors started quietly at first, whispered in corners, barely audible, but they grew louder, more poisonous, until the whole family seemed to lean into them like a chorus against me. "Esther's too controlling," they said. "She's always playing the victim." Even Lisa, who used to look up to me, joined in, her words laced with a coldness that cut deeper than any insult. I remember one afternoon when Lisa said softly, "Maybe you're just imagining things. You always think people are against you." Her voice wasn't cruel, but it was distant, like she no longer saw me as her sister. That was the moment a hollow ache crept into my chest, deeper than any argument or fight. It wasn't just about feeling rejected. It was about losing the people I thought I could trust. Robert, our father, was the hardest to face. His silence was deafening, a void where support should have been. At family gatherings, I caught him avoiding my gaze, his eyes drifting away like he was ashamed to be seen with me. It felt like an unspoken verdict, that my pain was a problem he didn't want to acknowledge. The warmth I once felt from our small family flickered and dimmed, replaced by cold stares and murmured doubts. Sometimes I caught glimpses of whispered conversations halting when I entered the room. The isolation was suffocating, like an invisible cage closing tighter around me. I questioned everything. Was I really the problem? Had I misread every look, every word, every silence? The self-doubt gnawed at me relentlessly. I'd spent years trying to be the glue holding us together, but now I wondered if I was just the glue no one wanted. Daniel was my anchor amid the storm. His presence was steady, a quiet strength that reminded me I wasn't entirely alone. One evening, as I sat on the living room floor, the weight of everything pressing down on me, he sat beside me and took my hand. "You're not crazy, Esther," he said quietly. "They don't see who you really are, but I do." His words felt like a lifeline, but even his concern couldn't fill the growing void inside me. I was emotionally exhausted, my spirit drained from constant battles fought with shadows and silence. The hope I once clung to was slipping through my fingers, replaced by a weary acceptance that maybe nothing would change. The thought settled like a heavy fog. If I wanted peace, I'd have to create it myself, even if that meant cutting off the people I loved. That idea terrified me, but the alternative was to keep bleeding, unseen and unheard. On one cold night, alone in my small apartment, I stared at my phone, fingers hovering over the screen. Could I really sever all ties? Could I live with that silence, that absence? The questions spun in my head, but beneath them was a hardening resolve. I'd been pushed to the edge of my endurance, and I was ready to build a wall no one could climb. The exhaustion wasn't rage yet. It was a quiet, hollow acceptance. I whispered to myself, I have to protect myself. I can't keep bleeding for a family that won't fight for me. The silence that followed was the calm before a storm I hadn't yet allowed myself to imagine. But deep inside, a seed had been planted. I was ready to prepare for the boundary I never thought I'd cross. Complete, unyielding silence. The breaking point came like a thunderclap at what was supposed to be a celebration. The room buzzed with congratulations as I walked into the family gathering to honor my nursing promotion, a milestone I'd worked so hard to achieve. The scent of baked ham and fresh flowers filled the air, laughter bouncing off the walls. But the warmth I expected never arrived. Instead, Isabella's voice cut through the chatter like a blade. "Esther," she announced loudly, eyes glinting with cruel satisfaction. "You are no longer welcome in the family home." The room froze. I felt the color drain from my face, the murmurs swirling into a deafening silence. I searched for some flicker of protest from the others, but the faces around me were masks of shock, confusion, and something darker, approval. Before I could even begin to process her words, another bombshell dropped. A family friend, one I thought was neutral, whispered to me with trembling lips. Isabella forged Dad's signature and transferred the deed of the house into her name. My heart stopped. The house, my sanctuary. The symbol of everything I'd sacrificed for this family was now ripped away through lies and deceit. I glanced toward Robert, whose eyes avoided mine like he was a ghost in his own home. His silence spoke volumes, a tacit endorsement of Isabella's betrayal. Everyone in the room, Daniel, Lisa, even distant relatives, stood frozen, some in disbelief, others with narrowed eyes that spoke of judgment. I felt the walls close in tighter, suffocating. The pain wasn't raw or explosive. It was a cold, sharp clarity slicing through every illusion I'd held onto. I stood there, the weight of it pressing down like an anchor, and something inside me shifted. The hopeful daughter who had begged for understanding, who had tried to mend the fractures, died right there in the quiet chaos of that moment. A different woman rose in her place, one with a calm, unyielding resolve. The veil was lifted. I could finally see the truth for what it was. There was no family to save. The hope that had once fueled my sacrifices dissolved into a bitter realization. The house, my most valuable asset and symbol of security, was stolen not by force but by cold, calculated betrayal. It wasn't an explosion of rage but a poised, unmistakable turning point. I felt the icy seed of a plan take root deep within me, a determination to reclaim what was mine, not through anger, but through measured, deliberate action. In the solitude that followed the gathering, the full weight of the betrayal settled around me like a suffocating fog. I replayed every moment, the years of quiet sacrifice, the $120,000 I'd poured into the house and family expenses, the canceled dreams left gathering dust in the corners of my mind. The emotional wounds carved by Isabella's relentless cruelty and my father's silence were raw. But beneath the grief, something sharper began to burn. Anger. Not the kind that consumes you until you're hollow, but a focused, simmering fire that sharpened my resolve instead of destroying it. I thought back over the patterns, the manipulation, the gaslighting, the constant dismissal. This has always been this way, I whispered into the empty room. I just didn't want to see. That quiet acknowledgement was a turning point. The pain was no longer a weight pressing me down. It was fuel lighting a path forward. Never again, I vowed silently. The phrase echoed in my mind, a mantra against the past. I opened the drawer where the legal documents sat, papers proving my ownership of the house, documents I'd kept hidden, unsure if I'd ever use them. Now, those papers felt like weapons in disguise, tools of leverage I had yet to wield. The awakening was profound. I no longer wanted approval or forgiveness. I demanded respect and justice. My silence became a shield, a deliberate weapon. I was no longer a victim begging for peace. I was a woman gathering strength in the quiet, preparing to reclaim control over a life that had been stolen piece by piece. One evening, with the weight of this resolve settling over me, I confided in Daniel. We sat in the dim light of my apartment, the hum of the city outside a distant backdrop to the intensity of our conversation. "I'm done explaining," I said, my voice steady but cold. "It's time they feel the silence, the absence." Daniel looked at me with a mixture of concern and respect, understanding that this was not a moment for sympathy, but for strategy. "I'm with you," he said quietly, "but promise me you'll be safe. Don't let this consume you." His warning was a tether to reality, a reminder that while the fire inside me was necessary, it needed to be tempered. We talked through the steps carefully. Isabella was the primary target. She had orchestrated the betrayal, and now she would feel the consequences. I would cut off all communication with her and the family members who had sided against me. No more financial support, no more silent sacrifices. I would block them on social media and phones, creating an impenetrable wall of silence. Most importantly, I would prepare the legal notifications regarding the forged deed, making it clear that I was no longer the woman who would be quietly pushed aside. It was the first time I approached this war with cold calculation instead of emotional desperation. The fear and exhaustion were still there, but they were drowned beneath a new posture, strategic, poised, and unyielding. As we mapped out the plan, I felt a strange calm settle over me. The vulnerability that had defined me for so long was fading, replaced by something sharper, purpose. This was no longer about surviving the storm. It was about directing it. The silence I was about to unleash was not empty. It was charged with power. Daniel's quiet support was a balm, but the strength I needed was inside me, waiting to be claimed. For the first time in years, I felt like I was reclaiming my autonomy, not as a desperate daughter or a broken sister, but as a woman who refused to be erased. The road ahead was uncertain, but one thing was clear. I was ready to fight on my own terms. I sat at the kitchen table, surrounded by stacks of papers and files, the soft hum of the laptop filling the quiet room. The weight of everything I'd uncovered pressed down on me, but I knew I couldn't let it crush me. I began mapping out every dependency that tied the family's fragile financial structure together. My mortgage payments had kept the house standing, the steady flow of money that kept the roof over our heads, and the walls warm through bitter winters. I had managed every utility bill, every property tax notice, every household expense without complaint, always covering gaps that others ignored or dismissed. It was my invisible thread holding the whole tapestry together. I paused to run my fingers through my hair, my heart pounding with a mixture of exhaustion and anger. The emotional labor was just as heavy, keeping family gatherings from dissolving into chaos, smoothing over tensions Isabella stoked, pretending everything was fine when it was anything but. I realized how much I had sacrificed, how often I had been the silent provider while others took my efforts for granted. The truth was brutal. Without me, the entire household budget would collapse like a house of cards. And yet, not one of them seemed to understand or care. That afternoon, I met with my lawyer, a steady presence who listened without judgment. She had seen cases like mine before. Families corrupted by manipulation, betrayal, and greed dressed up as loyalty. We went through every shred of evidence I'd collected. Bank statements showing my consistent payments, contracts with my signature proving ownership, and worst of all, documents highlighting Isabella's exploits. Her forged signature, the secret credit card debts she racked up close to $50,000, and her financial mismanagement that was slowly but surely bleeding us dry. The lawyer's face darkened as we discussed these findings, confirming what I already suspected. The deed was legally in my name, and any forged transfer was void. "You have leverage," she told me firmly. "You hold the power to force them to face the truth." That moment sparked a fire inside me. For years, I had been the one who needed them, needing family, needing peace, needing acknowledgement. But now, I saw clearly, they needed me more than I ever acknowledged. They depended on my money, my organization, my presence, and I was done being invisible. I began documenting everything meticulously. Every text message, every email, every transaction. I needed a record, a fortress of truth to stand behind when I finally drew my line in the sand. The cold realization settled deep inside me. This was no longer about forgiveness or reconciliation. It was about enforcement, about boundaries no one had dared to test. I whispered to myself as I closed the folder, "They need me more than I need them." And with that, the next phase began. In the days that followed, I became a ghost moving through my own life, silent, deliberate, calm on the surface, but inside, every move was calculated. I changed passwords on every shared account, locking Isabella out of the financial portals she had manipulated for so long. The online banking authorizations were updated to exclude her name, and I informed utility companies that, going forward, only I would make payments. I reached out quietly to my lawyer, arranging for cease and desist letters to be drafted, preparing the legal groundwork to expose the forged deed transfer and freeze any property transactions Isabella might attempt. Every action was small, almost invisible, but each one chipped away at the control she'd built on lies. At family gatherings, I kept my composure as if nothing had changed. I smiled politely, answered questions with measured calm, and said nothing about the storm gathering beneath my skin. Family members noticed subtle shifts, missed calls, unanswered texts, and a coolness where there had once been warmth. They whispered among themselves, whispering about me being busy or distant, but no one understood that my silence was a shield, the calm before the coming storm. Daniel watched me closely, his eyes sharp and concerned. "You're not the Esther who used to bend over backward," he said one evening, his voice low and steady. "You've hardened, but it suits you." Even as I nodded and kept up the facade, my mind was a whirlwind of plans and contingencies. I was a time bomb, my silence loaded with meaning and intent. The tension stretched taut, a living thing between us all, and I felt the weight of every unspoken word hanging in the air. I knew it would take time for the consequences to ripple through the family, but each calculated step brought me closer to reclaiming control. It was exhausting to keep the mask of normalcy, but I reminded myself that patience was a weapon, and I held it firmly in my grasp. Then, just as I was settling into this cold, measured pace, Lisa came to me unexpectedly one afternoon. She slipped into my apartment quietly, closing the door softly behind her. Her eyes were wide with urgency, her voice a whisper heavy with emotion. "I've got something you need to see," she said, sliding a worn folder across the table. I hesitated before opening it, the weight of suspicion battling with a fragile hope. Inside were bank statements, email transcripts and notes, proof that Isabella had siphoned off over $20,000 from Mom's secret savings account over the past 2 years. Money meant for me, an inheritance rightfully mine, stolen in shadows and lies. Lisa's confession hit me like a punch to the gut, but it also felt like a lifeline. "I can't support her lies anymore," she said quietly, eyes glistening with unshed tears. "I'm done watching her destroy us." The betrayal cut deeper than any argument, but in that moment, it became real. I was no longer alone in this battle. A fracture had formed within Isabella's seemingly unbreakable hold on our family. The dynamic shifted beneath my feet. Family fractures widening, control slipping through Isabella's fingers. Lisa's defection was both a gift and a warning. The web Isabella had woven was unraveling, and now I held the proof. I stared at the papers, feeling a complex storm of emotions: gratitude, sorrow, rage, but above all, a fierce clarity. This wasn't just about reclaiming what was mine anymore. It was about exposing the truth that had been buried under years of manipulation. Lisa's alliance changed everything. It gave me irrefutable evidence and a renewed urgency to act. I looked up at her and said quietly, "This changes the game." The cold resolve in my voice surprised even me. The family's fragile peace was cracking, and I was ready to press. The following morning marked the first moves in my silent war. I stopped every dollar of financial support, $2,500 a month that had quietly kept the house running, the bills paid, and the lights on. The mortgage payments ceased. Utility companies notified that Isabella's contributions were no longer accepted. I blocked calls and messages from Isabella and Dad on every channel: phone, email, social media, cutting off their access to me completely. Legal notices were dispatched to reverse the forged deed transfer, freezing any attempts to manipulate the property. The documents I had painstakingly gathered now carried the weight of inevitability. Isabella was blindsided. Without confrontation or warning, she felt the shifting power beneath her feet, but couldn't grasp its source. The family noticed the instability growing, bills left unpaid, a cold silence replacing my once warm presence. Daniel observed the transformation with a mix of awe and respect. "You've gone from the quiet caretaker to the one in control," he said quietly. His words echoed the truth I felt inside, a metamorphosis born of necessity and pain. I refused to engage in petty arguments or explanations. My silence was not weakness. It was a calculated weapon. The house, once a battleground of whispered accusations and silent betrayals, now stood as a symbol of my reclamation. The first consequences were falling, not as a crash, but a slow, methodical tightening of control that forced Isabella and Dad to confront the reality of my withdrawal. The air between us was colder, heavier, but I met it with a steady heart and unwavering calm. This was only the beginning, a measured strike in a longer war. The silence I wielded was sharp, unyielding, and pregnant with promise. They had taken from me for too long. Now it was my turn. The air in the room thickened the moment I stepped inside. Isabella had called this gathering with a tone of forced civility that barely masked the tension simmering beneath her polished smile. Relatives, some familiar, some distant, filled the space with murmurs and anxious glances. Daniel stood near the doorway, his presence a steady anchor amid the brewing storm. Robert hovered awkwardly by the corner, his eyes flickering between us like a man caught in a silent crossfire. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of every prepared document tucked safely in my bag. Today wasn't about pleading or explaining. It was about standing firm. Isabella's eyes, sharp and calculating, tried to maintain control as she addressed the room, claiming she wanted to clear the air and resolve family misunderstandings. But her gaze shifted to me, a challenge, as though daring me to speak. I met her stare calmly, unafraid. Pulling the folder from my bag, I laid it on the table. "There are truths here that I can no longer allow to be hidden," I began, voice steady, unshaken. I moved through the evidence with precision. The forged deed that proved the house was legally mine, documents Lisa had provided exposing the siphoning of Mom's savings, and detailed records of every dollar I'd poured into keeping this family afloat. The room grew eerily silent. Breaths caught in chests as I dismantled the web of lies with cold clarity. I saw the flicker of shock cross Isabella's face, her poised facade cracking for the first time. The power she wielded for so long dissolved under the weight of undeniable proof. Whispers erupted, some relatives exchanging stunned looks, a few casting subtle nods of support towards me. Robert's usual passivity faltered. His eyes darted nervously, as if suddenly aware of his own complicity. I spoke then, not with rage, but with a clear, unwavering voice. "I will no longer support behavior that disregards my dignity or exploits my generosity. From this moment forward, I set boundaries. No contact unless respect is given, financial independence maintained, and transparency observed. The room hung on my words, the shift in power palpable. No outburst, just a quiet reckoning settling over everyone present. This was my moment. Poised, dignified, victorious. Isabella's lips pressed into a thin line, her eyes narrowing into something cold and calculating. But the damage was done. The family's collective gaze had shifted, the tide of sympathy quietly rising in my direction. I could almost feel the invisible chains that had bound me for years snapping one link at a time. Without raising my voice, I communicated more than words could. I was no longer the invisible sister, the silent provider. I was the one holding the truth now. The air crackled with tension and release, a fragile balance tilting in my favor. As the gathering dissolved into murmurs and shifting alliances, I stepped away from the table, my chest heavy, but heart steady. I'd reclaimed my dignity in the face of years of betrayal, and the silence that followed was charged with promise. The days that followed were a cascade of consequences, relentless and undeniable. Isabella's carefully constructed world began to collapse piece by piece. Financial institutions flagged irregularities in payments. Her credit cards declined, her debts looming like dark clouds she could no longer outrun. Creditors called with increasing urgency, demanding settlements on the $50,000 of debt she had hidden so long. The mortgage on the family home froze, caught in legal limbo as the forged deed came under scrutiny. I watched it all unfold from a distance, my silence a fortress against the desperate storm she unleashed. Her calls came, urgent, pleading, sometimes venomous, but I remained steadfast. I didn't answer. Each message was a mix of false remorse and thinly veiled threats, but I refused to give her the satisfaction of a response. Robert reached out next, voice shaking, trying to mediate, to find some middle ground. I told him firmly, "No more. This ends here." For once, I held my ground, refusing to be the family's emotional punching bag. Lisa's testimony spread quietly among relatives, her courage in speaking the truth shaking Isabella's fragile alliances. Slowly, other family members began questioning the narrative they'd been fed for years. Whispers of doubt replaced the unquestioning loyalty Isabella had once commanded. The fracture lines deepened. Some relatives, who had once dismissed me, sought me out quietly, their apologies tentative but sincere. Isabella's social standing dwindled, the veneer of control peeling away to reveal desperation. I felt no triumph in her unraveling, only a cold satisfaction that justice, finally, was catching up with years of manipulation. The family's fragile foundation was cracking, and I watched as the silence I maintained spoke louder than any argument could. This was the reckoning they'd avoided for so long, and it was mine to observe with steady dignity. The cost was high, but the truth had been set free, and with it, my own liberation. Isabella wasn't done, though. In a final act of desperation, she ramped up her efforts to regain control. Legal threats arrived, accusing me of defamation and stirring up family disputes, empty bluster designed to intimidate and confuse. She took to social media, painting herself as the betrayed victim of a family conspiracy, garnering sympathy from some outsiders. Flying monkeys appeared. Friends and distant relatives pressured me to reconcile, whispering accusations that I was destroying the family and tearing us apart. But I was prepared. My lawyer swiftly countered every baseless claim, reinforcing the legality of my position. I held firm, refusing to engage in the public spectacle or private manipulations. Some family members, witnessing Isabella's unraveling facade, began to reach out with apologies of their own, words laced with regret for having ignored warning signs or taken her side blindly. I listened, accepting their sincerity, but the boundaries I'd drawn remained unbroken. I was no longer the sister who would bend under pressure or forgive without accountability. Isabella's isolation became palpable. Her once commanding presence diminished into a shadow of desperation and defeat. The confidence that had defined her crumbled, replaced by a hollow rage that no longer intimidated me. The arc was complete. Her reign ended by the very silence I'd mastered. In that quiet strength, I found the power to close the chapter without bitterness, only clarity. 6 months later, I sit in my home, legally mine, free from the debts and burdens that once suffocated me. The mortgage is secure, bills paid on time, my name on every document, every account. The house, once a symbol of betrayal and pain, now feels like a sanctuary of my own making. Daniel and I have grown closer, our relationship built on respect and honesty rather than obligation or hidden grievances. Family gatherings are rare, markedly subdued, with Isabella completely cut off. Lisa maintains a cautious but genuine connection, a fragile bridge between past wounds and potential healing. Robert remains distant, neither a fixture nor a force in my life. The chaos that once defined my family existence has been replaced by boundaries, clear, firm, respected. I reflect quietly on the journey, the silent battles, the emotional toll, the moments of doubt and resolve. I don't miss the chaos or empty approval, I whisper to myself, fingers tracing the worn edge of a photo album. Peace is worth more than their acceptance. The dignity I reclaimed was not born from confrontation alone, but from silence, from choosing when to speak and when to withdraw. Isabella faces consequences, her life fractured and unstable, but not destroyed. I have no wish to see her broken beyond repair, only to see justice served and balance restored. The future stretches before me, open, uncertain, but belonging to me. In this quiet victory, I have learned that freedom is not the absence of pain, but the presence of choice. I stand ready to protect my peace, to nurture my life on my own terms. The past will always be a shadow, but it no longer controls me. I am no longer invisible, no longer the silent caretaker. I am Esther Barrett, whole, empowered, and finally free.